together and how he is doing things to really shake up and bring a lot of people into the forefront and to shine the light on STEM. So this masterclass is Rocking STEM at Home with our master today, and that's Tsang. Welcome.
Everyone. Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on here, Tina.
Well, we actually met Rock when he was last year during our November showcase. So we had turned 5 years old, and we wanted to make sure that we could share our platform with so many other people that were doing things in the STEM space. And Rock was one of those that has a business that we wanted to make sure that we feature. So just a little bit about him. He's the founder and creator of STEM for Equality homeschool curriculum. He leads a STEM program, and he's a STEM coordinator at Ranney Intermediate High School, and that's in California. He received his degrees from several he received awards from several California state representatives and senators, and also received a considerable amount of money from Amazon. He is staunchly committed to making sure that the quality of STEM and STEM programming is at the forefront. And so today we're going to have a conversation really going into the essence of, one, his background, who he is. I want to make sure that you all get to follow him, so you make sure you follow him. He has a lot of tips, a lot of insight, and a lot of things that he's helping parents do, and to bring STEM into the home front. So without further ado, we're going to go in and get started. So, I always start this off with Rock. Just tell us a little bit about you, who you are, and how you got to be kind of this, what I call this STEM czar.
Well, thank you.
At home STEM czar.
Well, thank you for that. So I wanted to start I would like to start my story, I guess, when I first realized that, I think in middle school, I realized that I wanted to help people. That was like just something that a light bulb came up. My background was that as an elementary kid, I was bullied a lot. And so in 8th grade, I had opportunity to be part of leadership, and we actually mentor students. And I remember, helping out kids who were, had similar backgrounds and, were quite often bullied. So that really drove me to be like, okay, I want to help people. And in college, I actually studied psychology, believe it or not. And then I realized maybe this is not the route for me. I don't want to, go all the way to PhD and do this. And then at the time, I was actually going out and tutoring local high school students at Title I schools. And I realized, hey, I think I have a passion for this. So I jumped right into straight out of UCLA. I went back actually to go to grad school. And that's where I met my first challenge, which is my mentor teacher told me, Rock, I don't think you should become a teacher. And that was actually the first time I remember crying at work. Up at that point, it was like, I guess you can call this stereotypical Chinese kid, going to school, getting good grades and all that stuff, and never really encountering what I would call a challenge. And this is the first one where because of what she said, I was forced out of my accelerated program. I lost half my scholarship, and I was living with 6 roommates, which is a lot, which is more than my undergrad years.
Hey, Rob, I hate to interrupt you, but was there any more information or context around that statement?
So we were part of a new program that UCLA wanted to do, which is called Impact. So the idea was that we were an accelerated teacher program where we would be put with our mentor teacher for an entire year, which now looking back, I think that was a good idea, where you started with a mentor teacher in a classroom from day 1 till the end of the year. And the idea was eventually you would take over, let's say, 2 classes for teaching. So the idea was good. It was just the first year of the program. So as you can imagine, a lot of things were a bit bumpy. I was supposed to go with one mentor for the whole year. That mentor dropped out. Then I was placed with this mentor, but she already had another mentee, which is my, fellow program. And it was her first year, I think, being a mentor teacher to 2 mentees. And there was just a lot of, a lot of things that happened. And at some point she was just like, yeah, I don't think you should really become a teacher. And by the way, we were in South Central LA in an all boys floor, middle school,
Wow.
middle school boys. It was
Okay.
like, ooh, it was culture shock for me. I was like, oh, okay. And so from there, I remember that night, the admin actually saw me and said, hey, Rock, what's going on? I just kind of told her what happened,
Mhm.
like what she told me. She's like, don't give up. I mean, that's the most important thing is like, since I known you, is that you just don't give up. And she
Mhm.
really encouraged me that night. And so here I am 12 years later, not only still a teacher, but, running a successful STEM program. And I really believe that, STEM more than anything other, when we think of STEM, we think about, cool stuff like gadgets and technology. But really what's behind STEM is the mindset. And one of the biggest mindsets is persistence. Don't give up. Just because you have a problem doesn't mean, just because it's a question of what does failure mean to you?
Yeah.
When this thing doesn't work, right? And you get frustrated, well, why are you frustrated? Is it because of what that failure means to you? And so just like in my story, I could have given up then, right? I was kicked out. I was dropped out of the program and lost half my scholarship and everything. But here I am today, I became a teacher, and along the journey, started as a math teacher, went to science, then they asked me to do STEM. And I was like, I have no idea what it is, but okay, I'll try it.
And I think your story just rings so true to, regardless of, I would say, it's agnostic to culture or
Mhm.
ethnic groups. It's that persistence. If you want something and you feel passionate about it, then you go after it. And I would be remiss to say what you have done then to what you're doing now. I forgot to mention, everyone that's listening, Rock lives in California. So it is 6 a.m. for him. And we've been on since 5:30 his time. So he's dedicated and he's passionate about making sure that he can provide insight to STEM based on his experience. One, being an educator, and two, also being an entrepreneur and business leader in this space. So so we talked about your background. When did you realize the STEM was going to be or play a critical role in your, not just educational journey, but your career as well?
Well, I think it was around my fourth year teaching. I had chosen to go to a charter high school. I
Mhm.
was still out in still out in South Central LA, and I was asked, "Hey, Rock, could you help us run the?" And I still remember this vividly. It was almost to winter. We were, almost landing the school year, so to speak. And my admin came to me and said, "Hey, Rock, we want you to take over the Mesa class." And Mesa is just basically a class where the high school students do like STEM activities and they go to competitions.
Mhm.
Um, and I just, of course, I'm sweating. I'm like, I have no idea what to do with this class. And then, of course, on the surface, I'm like, sure, because I have no tenure. So I was like, yeah, of course, I'll take over the class. I don't know why I'm taking over the STEM class from the teacher who is an actual former engineer. And here I am, with my psychology background going, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I was panicking almost like not on the surface course, right? Because I've learned how
Mhm.
to composure, like, okay, of course I'll do it. But on the inside, I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I just say yes to? And so, beginning January, I walk into this class and there's the kids, and I go, so what are you guys doing again? I just took over the class. Help me out here. They're like,
Mhm.
oh, we're building a mousetrap car. Some of us are trying out this presentation thing. We have an egg drop challenge. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I
And
remember
so,
those egg drop challenges.
yeah. So what I realized at that point, one of the biggest epiphanies I had from teaching that was this idea of like, teaching is no longer a sage on a stage, but a guide on the side. And that was the key thing that I learned from that class, because the way I ran it was, I wasn't the center of information. I would do research and say, here's some YouTube videos, here's some tutorials on whatever you're learning to build. But the majority of the work was the students sitting there struggling with the problem and
Yeah.
trying to figure out, how do I build this so this mousetrap car so I can go up a ramp a certain
Mhm.
like degree, and those kind of things. And I remember actually that semester we went to competitions, we actually advanced to semifinals. I was like, wow, I was like floored, but I could not take really a lot of credit because a lot of students did most of the work. I was there really just to create that learning experience, if you will, to
Yeah.
set an environment where, I didn't grade them for failure. I just graded them for trying and trying and trying and being persistent.
Mhm.
And that's really what I learned from that. And I feel, that kind of applies to now that I'm a parent, right? And learning that, I feel like a lot of times what stops parents perhaps from like trying this STEM thing with their kids, even at home, let's say, is this like, oh, well, I wasn't good at science, or this belief in them, right? That, oh, well, I'm not the expert. Well, neither was I. I'm just going to full bluntly tell everyone, like, look, I have a psychology background, and, you know, by any stretch of imagination, like, how are you qualified? It's like, well, you're
Mhm.
right. I wasn't at first, but I learned that the best thing I can do is create a great learning experience for the students to explore, to fail, to struggle, to persist. And that's the best thing that I can do. And
I think that's one of the best things that any teacher, parent, anyone that's leading anything to be able to help usher people through,
Mhm.
I would say either complex issues, complex or different types of environments. But you said a number of key things. One, you talked about your education, being a psychologist. And I am a staunch believer, first of all, from birth, everyone is an engineer because you're always designing something. And everything that you're creating, whether you're in financial services to art, whether you're art history major, you always have a product. So that level loads you. And then you're always advancing what you're trying to do. So that's design of experiment. So the biggest thing is what's in your head, it's your mindset and what you can do and what you can't do. And so you broke through those barriers. What do you see as being some of the biggest, I would say, stumbling blocks now that you took this class on
Mhm.
and you learned and grew from it? What do you think is preventing either minorities or in particularly girls
Mhm.
from having that a high self attitude
Mhm.
going into more technical spaces?
Well, in my experience, running the STEM programs, I really try hard to recruit girls because what I realized was that hmm, that they are very creative, and maybe what their belief is, what they grow up around is like, oh, okay, well, girls and boys should still do certain things.
Mhm.
So there's still that stigma, but also realizing that once they get into the space and they realize I can do it, I'll be honest, like in my years of teaching, I feel like most of the student leaders I've had have been girl students. Once they get in and they realize, hey, this isn't just all about, like the technical aspect, like the coding or whatnot, the math and whatnot. There's actually a lot of creativity involved in problem solving, communicating. I always make sure I do projects every year that involve presentation skills.
Mhm.
So that's something I really want to emphasize because I don't want my students to become the stereotypical STEM students of like, they're so good, but they can't communicate. Like they can't
Right.
communicate in front of an audience. And I was like, nope,
Absolutely.
that's not going to happen.
Absolutely. And that was one of the things with me being an engineer, mechanical engineer, going into the corporate space. Fortunately, the university that I went to, I had to do a lot of presenting,
Mm-hmm.
but not everyone has that opportunity. And you don't realize that's one of the core competence in being able to communicate your thoughts, your ideas, your inventions, your solution. Because you can have the best solution in the world. And if you can't communicate it properly, then it may not go anywhere. You may not get the funding, you may not get the support. So what are some things that, before I ask you this question, because we did talk about, well, one, you being a teacher, I want people to also understand your business as well. Tell us a little bit about your business and how you help parents in STEM.
Yeah. So obviously I'm on social media, and one of the things I realized, and this hit home during COVID, was that I never met a happy parent during COVID. And I And
Okay, explain that.
a lot of parents are just very frustrated. I feel like COVID exposed a lot of things in our education system, like more pronounced than what it would have been.
Mhm.
Because now you're in a situation where, the families hold up together in their house and everyone's sharing devices. Everyone's trying to figure out solutions for this and that. And just realizing that there's a lot of issues. And out of that sort of frustration can this idea of like, well, what if they just did the STEM at home, right? Because I think a lot of times people feel like there's this barrier of like, oh, I need to spend so much money on STEM,
Mhm.
for these advanced things. Like they think, oh, it's about robotics, it's about coding, and they take a lot of money. It's like, honest truth is like, those are just tools. The
Right.
key thing you're training your children on, and yourself perhaps, is the mindset of like, I can problem solve, I can persist, I am creative. And those are the things that I think are most important about STEM. The tools, you can always get training on the job. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter what going in. It's your mindset and your character. And that's what most employers are saying now. It's like, I'll train employees on any skill they need, right? But
Mhm.
I can't train you on getting to work on time, knowing how to communicate, knowing how to be a team player. Those are things that are harder. They're way hard to train, because it's a mindset, it's a belief, it's a personality perhaps, and changing those things is much harder. There's a great book called Mindset by Carol Dweck, who's also UC alumni,
Mhm.
that talks about, like the growth versus fixed mindset. And I think that's a great book for parenting, or just understanding why some people succeed and why some others don't, given that, we always believe that like talent is so important, right? In sports and anything else. Sure, talent is awesome, no doubt. And I'm not discounting anyone who has talent. But now it's a question of like, so what are you going to do with it? Are you going to persist? Do you believe that you can improve? Because even the most talented people always believe that I have to improve. I have to practice. I have to, get up at 5 a.m. and do certain things to, keep going. So.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I constantly talk about, when I was working in the corporate space, and I was completely blown away by a couple of people that I worked with and worked, within my organization that I led. And some of the ones that actually did the most, and I would say took the business, so what we were working on the furthest, they didn't have a degreed technical background.
Mm-hmm.
But what they did have was tenaciousness. They followed up, they listened. They were just very good leaders in that space, and they could outpace some of the, I would say, the degree engineers. But it had nothing to do with the educational training per se. It
Mm-hmm.
was what they thought and what they chose to do. So whatever you put your mind to, you can always achieve it and accomplish. Therefore, STEM is for everyone, but it's a discipline behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So what advice would you give parents? I hear about this STEM thing.
Mm-hmm.
I know some things about it, or the parent themselves could be an engineer, come from a STEM background, or be in a STEM profession. And they are either struggling to generate that interest, and because of all the subliminal messages that's out here of what still to this day, and it's still shocking to me in 2022, that we still have all these messages that suggest that it's for a particular group, or it's for a particular archetype.
Mm-hmm.
What advice will you provide for some parents to overcome that?
That is a great question. I think it starts with the parents themselves, and what they believe. So it's really, it's a question of introspection. It's like, well, is it because you're afraid, let's say, to be wrong in front of your kids, or to not look like a parent? What does a parent mean, right? Like, I feel like a lot of times parents, including myself, now that I'm a parent, right, I'm trying very hard to be, like a model for my child, and realizing that, you know, I'm going to make mistakes, I'm going to get frustrated, but the question becomes, what am I going to do in those moments, right? In the follow-up. And with guiding your child, it's really first about like your mindset and examining yourself, like, well, is it because I believe I'm not good at this, so therefore I may be projecting that onto my child? Or is it like, hey, and just say, hey, you know what, here's the thing, when I get a question in class that I don't know, I go, that's a great question, can you Google it? And generally they find out, you know, on their own. And that's the greatest thing I can do, is just be honest, like, hey, I don't know the answer, but we can find out together, or you can find it yourself. Which one do you want? And of course, you know, as a parent, you want to provide resources, and, you know, you want to provide the best for your child. And I absolutely believe that. But we're parents. We're not, we're not, you know, we're not God. We're not Google, right? And even Google has its limits, of course. So it's realizing that, you know, embracing your humanity and just saying, okay, I want you to learn, and I really want to know what you want to learn, because there's just so many pathways to STEM. You know, STEM can range from anywhere from like your typical like blue collar job to, you know, like rocket science. There's just such a huge spectrum of careers, interests. And, you know, the biggest question really is, you ask your child, what problem do you want to solve in this world? That is the key question, because that helps focus everything on, like, not just career, beyond career, right? Beyond this or that, even passions, put that aside. Just say, what problem do you want to solve? What makes you tick? What makes you think like about it all night, that you can't stop thinking about this problem? And how can I solve this problem? That is the key, one of the key questions I would tell parents, like, ask your child, what problem do they want to solve? They'll tell you. And if they don't know, well, there's a whole world of stuff there's a whole world of problems waiting to be solved by someone.
Absolutely. And isn't it also, I always say, just piggybacking off of something that you had said previously, you know, parents think that you have to spend a lot of money. Technology is indicative of STEM, and it's not. You know, when I was growing up, the outside was my STEM class. You know, the trees, you know, going through, I was a tomboy. And so I loved everything about nature. Hence, you see my background. There's everything about nature that it's free, that you can learn so many inventions, and you start to become creative. And when I think about STEM, I think about just, it gives you the freedom of being able to discover. So it's not necessarily that you're looking for the right answer or the perfect answer, but you're opening your mind to the possibilities of so many different derivatives of something, right? Because that's how you have to apply things. Whenever you create anything, you have to figure out the environment that it's going in anyway. So we do have a couple of poll questions. I also want to remind everyone, if you have any questions at all you want to ask Rock, any questions around school, looking at different careers, what's some advice that he would provide to you if you're thinking about a non-technical background, but you still want to maintain some aspect around STEM, or where STEM can be there, then please put your question either in the chat box, come off of mute, and you can get a chance to ask your question. We do have our first polling question that comes up, and we have two more before we break off into we have a little STEM activity that you're going to do today. Okay, so the polling questions are coming up. I think it's going, we have 30 more seconds. And I think we have, okay, so, all right. So the first polling question, if you're on Facebook, you may not be able to see it, but it's, what percentage of STEM employees do you think do not have an advanced degree? 15%, 56%, 33%. And I'm going to stop sharing. Rock, what is the answer?
33.
So you want to give some details around that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of, so actually I'm just going to, I guess, my own school district. I'm very blessed to be in a school district that really supports what I'm doing. In terms of, STEM is sort of, in our district at least, is under the umbrella of career technical education. For those parents out there, you may remember your home ec class, your wood shop, your metal shop class. Those are still on, not only ongoing in our district, but they're thriving. And those are the kind of jobs that are STEM, and because you're problem solving, you're creating something, right, with your hands. And most of them, they take in an AA degree or just going to trade school. And those are great examples of not only careers, but just, what kind of problem do you want to solve, right? Do you want to build something to solve a problem for someone? And that's where those sort of careers kind of come in. And so I feel very blessed again to be in a district where that's very supported, on top of just, having STEM choices that are available to all the students.
Okay, and what we're going to do, we're going to go on and put up our next polling question as well. But before we do that, Maddie has a question. Would you come off of mute? And also we would like to see you as well to ask your question.
Hello, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Maddie.
Hey, Maddie.
I'm a little bit under the weather, so my voice is a bit off. But I wanted to ask how you influence diversity. Diversity aside from gender in your program. I know you talked about trying to reach out to more girls because of the stigma and how the STEM and science field is really more male dominated. But aside from that, how do you include like ethnicity, race, religion, that type of thing, if you do?
That is a great question, Maddie. And don't worry, I have allergies right now. I'm struggling through just trying to breathe through my mouth and not trying to breathe through my nose because it sounds horrible. Yeah, that's a great question. So in my context of, being a teacher, I'm in an area where it's heavily Latino population. So that's obviously where I draw most of my students from, because that's just what I'm surrounded by. And my program is interesting because it does attract, I think the idea of STEM, right? When I throw out that we have a STEM program and here's some of the things you can do, there's robotics, there's 3D printing, it actually in and of itself appeals to students of different diversity. So I have a fairly diverse class in terms of, ethnicity and religious backgrounds, because I attract students from just different areas of around us. So some students actually transfer to our school because they're like, oh, I want to do the STEM program. And we don't have that here in our local middle school, for example. So I think that STEM itself speaks across, the diversity aspect on its own, because at the end of the day, it's not necessarily just, oh, that's a cool robot, or, oh, I get to do something cool, right? Your natural tendency is to be like, well, that class allows me to explore. That class allows me to break things down and not get in trouble. And it allows me to explore. And I think those are the things that I try to hit on when I try to talk to the student, like recruit the students. Yes, there's an aspect of like, turn on the robot, and every, elementary kid goes crazy because it's a robot right in front of you and it's remote controlled and it turns on and runs around. The idea is you sell them what they want, but you give them what they need, right? Like the initial attraction is like, oh, well, that's the robot. But once you come to class, they realize, oh, there's a lot more going on than just a cool robot, so to speak.
And Maddie, you have another question as well?
Yes, ma'am. I also wanted to ask if you do anything for like gifted kids, so people who learn differently might be ahead, and also people who might have learning disabilities or have something else going on where it takes them a little bit more time for them to grasp certain concepts.
That is a great question again, Maddie. Actually, yes, my program does have both ends of those that you had just spoken of. I do have students who would do well in other programs, and also students who are who come out of like the SPED education. I work closely with the SPED coordinator actually at our school in terms of getting students into the class whenever, you know, it's possible. Like, okay, this kid is on the edge. Like, hey, Rock, can we, like, this kid really wants it. And I'm like, okay, if they really want it, then I have no problem accepting them. You know, I still have to work within the, you know, confines of that. But I'm very open to just trying to get students from wherever they come from, because I realize this is because I don't want to discriminate against anyone necessarily. I mean, I do have some requirements like get straight C's, please. You know, I don't think that's just something I kind of throw out there, because I'm like, well, I want to see at least that they can persist in their work. That's really all I'm asking, right? And other than that, it's just like, are you nice to your teacher? Okay, cool, then you're in. So yeah, great question actually. And in terms of the work that they do, I allow my students as much freedom as I can in terms of the creativity that when they do projects, for example. So a great example would be in my computer science class, I don't start out with coding at all, actually. I start off with a very simple question. How many computers are in the classroom? Or in this case, how many computers are in your room? You know, the students will count up, right? All the computers around, and they give me the number. I'm like, okay, so what about phones? Are they considered computers? And the list goes on, you know, and then they get into this almost philosophical debate, like what is a computer at its core, right? And that's how I start off the year with computer science, is just talking about what does that mean? And one of the first projects that they do in the class, Maddie, is actually come up with a phone app that solves a real world problem, and then present it to us like you're on Shark Tank. And I actually do show episodes of Shark Tank to get an idea of like, this is what I want you guys to be able to do. And so students get really creative about, well, what problem do we want to solve, and how can a phone app solve that problem? I'm trying to think of examples from the past years that I've done this project. One of the most creative ones that I thought really had actual business potential was a ride sharing app specifically for people with disabilities, so like wheelchairs. Because if you think about the Uber, like they don't really, not all of them can accommodate people like the same wheelchairs or crutches. And so the students came up with this idea, like, why don't we just have an app that specifically catered to these people? I'm like, holy moly, I didn't come up with the idea. The students did. I did not. I didn't even give them the idea. I just said, find a problem that you want to solve, like as a group, you know, and that's what they came up with. I was like, okay, this actually has potential, because now that they have the idea right, if they wanted to push that further, then they would just find people who can code the app, right? Or learn it themselves. So
no, I think that's pretty awesome.
yeah.
So we have CT. Thank you so much, Maddie, and I hope you feel so much better. And we have CT that has her hand raised. If you can come off of mute, and so we can see you. It's nice seeing you again, CT.
Hi, good morning. Yes, so you mentioned that you had like some standards for students entering your program. Is there a certain criteria that you have for your students? Is there something that like you want them to have when you want them to enter your program, or can they just enter your program?
So the way it works in my school, like the way it's set up, is just they apply. And I just look at, okay, do you have straight C's? And then what does your elementary teacher say about you? And generally that's about it. I try not to look for anything else, so that I don't have my own biases. And, you know, and that's really it. I don't really mind that the students have no background in STEM, or they come from a family where they're like, you're going to be an engineer. It's like, well, okay, great. You know, but the purpose of the middle school program is to sort of just whet the appetite and get students acquainted. And, you know, I point to, again, like I'm very fortunate to be and blessed to be in a school district where this is supported, because the local high school, which is also Title I, has a high school STEM program where we're one of the only high schools, I think, that has an aviation program. And we have, biomed, engineering, computer science. We have all these, amazing pathways for students to go to afterwards. So I can always point to, like, hey, what you're learning here is going to continue in high school if you choose, and I know that a lot of my former students go through the STEM program there, and some choose not to. And I'm perfectly fine with that. Because like at the end of the day, it's about them and it's about their choice, what they want out of their life.
Perfect.
So, great question.
Thank you. Thank you so much, CT. What I want to do is to hit one more polling question. So Valeria, if you can put the third polling question up, we'll go through that. And then we're going to transition to our hands-on activity. Some of the things in which Rock helped some of his clients with to open the mind. So for those that's on Facebook, our polling question is, what percentage of boys and girls will lose interest in STEM if not immersed in it by 5th grade? So choice 1 is 50%. Yeah, it's 50%, 57, 82%. And the third is 92%. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so there's 2 numbers for boys and girls. So there's 2 different numbers.
Okay, so, okay.
Yeah, that's why I put respectively. I think that's the correct grammar. Correct me if I'm wrong, because grammar is not my forte.
That's okay. I just need to read. I should have had my reading glasses on.
I can't see without my glasses, so I'm right there with you. I'm very nearsighted. So
okay, I think so we have a couple more minutes. I'm going to end it now. Okay, if you want to put your response in. Okay.
Alrighty.
All right. So you see it, Rock?
Yep, I see the poll. And the correct answer is 92-97.
That's shocking. That is absolutely shocking. It's shocking, but also not surprising, because we still live from a societal standpoint. When we start talking about biases, implicit biases, and how those can happen in a community, in a classroom, subliminal messaging that happens within the commercialization of marketing of products. I remember seeing, and I know we are live, but it was still surprising to me. I can't remember where I was traveling recently. This is in the past couple of weeks. And I saw a Barbie doll. So this is not against people who like Barbies. But there's a Barbie doll set where they're having babies. Or the puppies having babies. It's not that anything is totally wrong with that, but I just left. I know where I was. I was in New York, and I just left an event when we were talking about women empowerment. I think family structures and growing families, I think that is a privilege. I think that is a wonderful thing. However, what are some of those counterbalances that's out there to be able to help overcompensate the stereotypical manner in which we place women and girls? So the fact that 97%, if they don't have some type of immersive environment that they're in, that they would lose interest in STEM or a lot of technical things, that's just staggering to me. And I was really surprised with the number of boys at 92%. Can you share some insights and information around that?
Yeah, so I think, when we talk about the word immerse, right, that's a great word to look at and examine, like, what does that mean? And it comes down to, I think you were sharing a study from the Arizona, I think, yes, about how even if students go to, let's say, an after school program, or they're part of something like beyond just schooling, that they still don't feel confident despite of that, like what we would consider immersion, like, hey, you're part of this STEM thing after school. I remember as an elementary student, we had to pay for math science
Mhm.
It was an after school program where they did like science experiments and we launched rockets back in the day, like little tiny rockets. And you would think like, okay, well then you're immersed, right? But there's so much more to the day. There's so much more to that word of immersion of like, well, is it being talked about at home? Is it being talked about in classes by the teachers? If you think about the public school education system, I would say I see the students sometimes more often than their parents, to be honest, at
Mhm.
times. For certain students, it's, because they work a couple of jobs, or they work night shift and then they sleep during the day. So it's a question of like, what influences are there? And on top of that, now there's the big factor of, social media and
Right.
what are we looking at, and what is the algorithm feeding you based on what you are watching.
Yeah.
So
And those that thank you. I think those who are interested, and Rocky brought it up, and we talked before we went live, but Kimberly Scott is someone, if you can follow her, she does amazing work at Arizona State University. She was also President Obama's it's the National Academic STEM Collaborative, but she also won an award, I think, during his first term. But she's doing phenomenal work in looking at studies around self-efficacy for minority girls and just their attitudes on STEM after even being exposed. So just again, the biases, the climate, the environment, social media plays a huge role in making someone feel confident or not in their abilities and being able to do things. So we're going to transition over to Rock. You have some very fun and simple STEM hands-on activities. And it's not just, whenever I think activities, I feel like I'm in grade school, but whenever you're able to do anything with your hands, and regardless of age, it helps your mind. It helps
Mhm.
you think about things in a different way. There's so many questions that you can garner just
Mhm.
by that activity. So it
Yeah,
shifts your DNA. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can walk everyone through the activities.
awesome. Yeah. So the first one actually is very simple. It's called egg drop challenge. You just need an egg. I highly recommend you put that egg in a plastic bag, a sealable plastic bag, because it might get messy. And after that, it's just finding whatever materials you can around your house and building a contraption for the egg to keep it safe and throw it up. Or, if you're in the second floor, drop it. Whatever works in your environment. But that's the challenge. Egg, materials, figure out how to build something that will keep the egg safe. So, typical things that people find are like cardboard boxes. Let's see here. I mean, I can even use, I don't know, I have a box here that I can just put the egg in, for example, but is that going to be enough, right? What's in the box? Well, let's see. Is there padding? Is there, like, let's see here. Oh, well, there's a foam pad there's a foam thing in here that might be useful, right? To keep the egg safe. I've seen different types of contraptions, and I won't say anything specific because I don't want to give you any ideas. So yeah, that's it. And so if you have, I'm trying to think, if you don't have an egg, I'm trying to think what would be a good substitute. Let's see here. What would be a good substitute? I guess anything fragile. Let's see.
Yeah, and while you're looking up that, I've done several egg drop competitions, and one of the things there's a barrage of things you start to look at. One is just the structure itself, examining the different materials, cardboard versus wood.
Mhm.
If you have it could be a synthetic fiber or something. You can have wire mesh that you can hold to cradle the egg. You can have foam.
Mhm.
You can put grass. And I would say try as many things as you possibly can.
Mhm.
And that's going to tell you a lot about inertia, just dynamics, and also the absorption of shock
Mhm.
from the different materials. So
Mhm.
it's a quadrille of things. You can put some leaves in there, again, here are the mountains behind me. I
Mhm.
love being outside. So you can You can play with a lot of things. I don't know if any of you have any of those materials on hand now.
I mean, I've
So
seen students use socks, like nylon stockings, socks, you know, eyeglass cases, or grab an Amazon box, cardboard, magazines, plastic bags. Let's see here. What else? And I'm just
And-
grabbing stuff that's
and
just
Rob,
right around me. Yes.
as you're walking through that, so and
Mhm.
what is what are some of the things that they can learn by doing just this particular exercise, both the parents as well as or anyone that's working?
Well, material science, you know, how materials interact, right, with each other. I think you hit a lot of points already about, like, you know, like impact absorption and like physics, right? This is real life physics here. You know, because the age challenge can be applied to like safety of a car, right? When a car crashes, what happens? Why do we have airbags? Why is it that we have airbags instead of, you know, like foam? Or why is it that we have
Helmet,
yeah,
or
helmet.
when you're rollerblading, or I mean, do people rollerblade anymore? I might be dating myself.
I think they say, I think Stranger Things brought a lot of things back. Yeah, like D&D and all that stuff and rollerblading. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. I see what
That's
you're doing.
true. And what type of career? So when you, again, things start very simple. You know, you have you have a quadre of things at home that you play around with, and it leads to, as we talked about helmets, we talked about the airbags that's in cars. What type of careers can blossom just from this one exercise?
Oof. I mean, you know, JPL is always looking for ways to protect astronauts, right? Cars, obviously. Anywhere where you want to keep people safe, right? And want to be efficient about it, because, and that's the beauty of STEM, is like learning how to create something within constraints or limits. And this is where it's kind of different from science experiments. Science experiments wants everything to be as perfect as possible, right? As unbiased as possible, as, you know, like the environment has to be just, you know, perfect, right? Or it's not a valid experiment. But in STEM, when you're doing things in real life gets in the way. You know, you have all these limits. I can tell you that when I was running the Mesa class, you know, I had a shoestring budget. I barely had just enough money to get mousetraps. And after that, it was like, all right, everyone, go home, find Amazon boxes. You know, bring materials that you think can help with the egg drop. I don't know. I literally said, I don't know. Like, just go home and find stuff. And that's what my students did. They're like, okay. And so they brought, like, you know, packaging peanuts. They brought all this stuff from home, straws and everything else that they could find. Like, I was like, I'm gonna bring stuff from home from my own, like, you know, apartment. But that's not enough for the group. And they're like, we'll bring some stuff. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And
No, and I think you're
that
right.
was a limit. That was a limit, right? You know,
Yeah. And
another
Ari,
limit.
oh, okay. So I was gonna say, I see Ari. Yes, Ari says she has quite a few things at home that she can work for that
All
project.
right. Yeah.
And I will also say, when you do the project, send us the picture, tag us in your social media, or send us a picture, and then we can post it as well. But we want to see what you all were able to come up with this particular project. And then the second project, Rock, is what?
Oh, it's just aluminum foil boat experiment. You take one piece of aluminum and you try to fold that into a boat. And you find like a bowl of water. So any kind of Tupperware, you can fill it with water that's, you know, just enough to have the boat float. And you just start dropping like coins or buttons or anything of that kind of material in there until it sinks. And then you go back and then redesign the boat. Okay, this one sunk at, let's say, 20 pennies. Okay, what can we do to improve the boat? And that leads to questions about like buoyancy. It leads to questions about, you know, boat design. Like, why is it that, you know, a battleship, a gigantic ship, can just float in the middle of the ocean? Like, that thing's huge, right? But what most people don't realize is the boat is actually empty, like on the bottom, like the hull is actually like mostly empty on the bottom floor. You know, the top floor, of course, there's people and everything else, but that's how we design it. And
Yeah. And I think if you have some apples, So again, I might be dating myself, but we had a county state fair. So it was the whole bobblehead,
Oh yeah.
your head to bite an apple. So now you have to ask yourself the question, what makes that apple buoyant or an orange? And you
Right.
have some oils that's in it. So many things that you can do. So just get a bowl or a pot of water
Mm-hmm.
and just start putting things in there. And the different materials that you get, whether it's aluminum
Mm-hmm.
with popsicle sticks. So I will have, some of our ambassadors, we will have the aluminum, we will fold the sides up and you will put some popsicle sticks, or it can just be the aluminum.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I
and
don't-
so
yeah, no,
testing
go
all
ahead.
of those different materials. I'm sorry, there was a delay. What were you saying, Rock?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I've had students. A suggestion for everyone is some of my students, what they've done is, since I've only given each team one piece of foil, some of them actually cut out a little piece, build a mini boat, right? Try to like build a mini boat, and that leads to like this idea of models in a prototype in what's called iteration. So prototyping your boat, like building a smaller, usually prototypes are usually smaller versions of what you're trying to build.
Yeah.
And so my students actually got creative at, well, let's cut a little piece and let's try to like create it first, right? And then once we like the design then we'll use the rest of the aluminum foil to build the actual one. So that leads to this idea of like, well, it's just like writing an essay. You gotta have a rough draft. And having a rough draft actually helps you get your idea down first, roughly, then you can refine it. And that's another thing about engineering, is that you're never really quite done. You can always make improvements, or else there wouldn't be an iPhone 15, for example.
I know. Can you imagine? We're already on talking about iPhone 15. I think I still
Yeah.
be on 12.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, why couldn't we just stop there? Well, there's a business side to it, but also the
And then
idea
there's environmental changes, and then you also
Yeah.
have to get the adaptation of it merging into new and different markets. So making some adjustments for that market penetration.
Mhm.
There's a whole barrage of things that happens and why we have to continue to think. Rob, before we close, this
Oh yes.
almost shocking that is an hour is about to go. So please,
Oh wow.
if anyone is out there, if you have any questions or if there's any comments, please feel free to either raise your hand or post it in our chat. And also make sure that you follow Rock as well. He'll be more than willing to reach out to you. Oh, Maddie,
Yes.
if you can come off of mute and so we can see you. Hi, Maddie.
Hi. I just wanted to say that I really like how you were talking about the way that you run your computer science class, and I really like that. Personally, I did a computer science class in like 7th grade, I believe, and we pretty much got straight into coding, and it was like block coding that I did in elementary school and with this program. So then I went up to Java because I was just ahead. But I really like how you do diverse things. I wanted to say that I think that's really, really cool, and it's different, and I love it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie. So, and I forgot the question I was going to ask you, but Rock, just in closing, one, I just want to thank you for you stepping into an environment that was unique and different from what you had traditionally studied, and you embraced it. Years ago, they said 80% of the jobs today or in the future, it requires some form of STEM skills. I would dare say it's even higher than that now. Whether you're taking on a traditional STEM professional job, or I would say even any service jobs, you need to have some level of STEM academics and understanding around that. And so we want to make sure that one, we definitely support you and whatever we can do to work on some things together to make sure that we're expanding the mind and I would say dispelling the myth about who can actually participate in STEM, what STEM is. And I just look at it as it's an area and an opportunity for people to actually step into and explore. You can be destructive, you can be reconstructive, you can create from nothing, or you can create from a pile of data and information. But it's a space to be able to operate and grow. What are some final words that you would say to either parents or students? What would be some of the words that you would tell your younger self, looking back and thinking about where you are now?
Yeah, I think, I think Maddie had one more question.
Oh, Maddie, you have a question? Okay.
Yeah, I just
Oh,
saw
yes.
yeah. Let's see. Do you incorporate your background in psychology into your lessons at all? Trying to think. Yes, I think, and no, because I think what I've realized is, and this is not this is not an indictment against colleges in general, but what I realize is a lot of colleges teach theory, especially at the higher levels. Like I went to UCLA for my undergrad, and what I realized, a lot of it is very theoretical, right? And a lot of it doesn't necessarily apply to real life unless you really, really look for it. But I do understand, like, okay, I teach middle school students, so a great example, I guess, of that is when they build their website, I make it all about them. I tell them, right, create a website about yourself, talk about your topics or your hobbies, talk about who you are, talk about your family, talk about whatever you feel comfortable like typing out. And that kind of gets kids interested because it's like, well, it's about me. And just understanding that psychology of like, okay, at that age, it's all about them. Cool. So let's use that to my advantage. Make it all about them, and just make it about something that they like. And that's why, like the example I said before, like find a problem that you want to solve and just come up with a phone app for it. Then they have to talk about it in a group, right? And that's where collaboration and all this other psychology about like group work comes in, of like, well, how do we negotiate whose idea we use? Do we have anything common, right, that we can talk about? Because I tell them because at the beginning here, they do introduce themselves and they talk about what they like and whatnot at their groups. And so I say, hey, look at what you guys ever discussed. What common interests do you have that perhaps you can dig into? Do you all like skateboarding? Do you all like a certain, I don't know, show or whatever? Maybe that can be the start of a problem you want to solve. So, perfect. Yeah.
And I think Maddie followed up. She said, for example, STEM being used in other fields, for example, like telemedicine and having therapy sessions virtually.
Oh, okay. I didn't see
your background in understanding your students.
So the problem solving one, I think, kind of applies to that as well, as because it's coming from their background. Let's see what else. So for example, so I do bring in a lot of, I try to bring in as many guest speakers, a diverse amount of guest speakers as possible, to speak to the students, because I only have so much bandwidth, and I'm not afraid to say, hey, I don't know everything, so let's get people in. Yeah, actually my wife does telehealth, so I do talk about that at times. And let's see, therapy sessions, yes, okay. They should use your background. Using my background to understand students, well, I would say I definitely one of the few people in my school that look like me, if that makes sense. But it's never really bothered me, because as soon as I got into teaching, I realized as long as you care and as long as you try to communicate with the parents who are majority Spanish speaking, if you just speak broken Spanish, most parents will work with you. And the idea is, you try to look for commonalities, right, and with people, rather than what makes you different. I mean, you can celebrate, obviously you want to celebrate differences. I'm not saying that. And my emphasis right now is saying, hey, I've been invited to, like parents have invited me over for like parties and stuff. I'm like, okay, well, I didn't expect that, but okay. I mean, community engagement, so sure.
Absolutely. Well, I think we don't have to worry about the question that I asked you. I think the question and the comments in which Maddie had sent, I think it closes it out on the perfect note. Just making sure that you have an open mind, and there's diversity and inclusion. And with the inclusion, you will have diversity in any solution that we're putting out there. Rob, thank you so much for coming on. I know getting up at 5 to be on at 5:30 and making sure that you can share your insight, knowledge, and tips on STEM and how somehow we can help rewrite this ship together. So look forward to working with you on some things in the future. And I wish you all a wonderful day. All of the, before we sign off completely, all those who are part of our cohort, or if you would like to be a part of our cohort, we do have our hackathon that's going to start on October 15th. And this is talking about climate change. So you're going to have to put that together. Information has already been sent out, but if you have not received any information, please make sure you get in contact with us at info@hscamps.org, or you can reach out to us on any of our social media platforms, and you have our telephone numbers as well. But that's going to start soon. Okay, so I wish you all a wonderful weekend. Be safe out there, and we will see you. Those that's going to be a part of our hackathon, we'll see you on the 15th of October. Okay, take care.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Guys, thank you. Thank you, Rock.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely, it was. Thank you.
Yeah.